During the Cold War, fear of nuclear war pushed governments to search for powerful new weapons. In the United States, that fear led to a secret CIA program known as Project MKUltra. For over 20 years, the agency conducted hidden experiments to see if the human mind could be controlled, often using drugs and psychological manipulation on people who had no idea they were part of the tests. When the program was exposed in the 1970s, the truth shocked the world. What once sounded like conspiracy theories turned out to be real. The Cold War and the search for mind control. Project MKUltra began in 1953 during the height of the Cold War. At the time, American officials feared that the Soviet Union and other rival nations were developing advanced techniques for psychological warfare. Intelligence reports suggested that enemy governments might already be experimenting with ways to control thoughts or extract information from prisoners. The CIA wanted to know whether such technology was possible. If a method of controlling human behavior could be developed, it might provide an enormous strategic advantage. Imagine being able to manipulate an enemy's decisions, force a captured spy to reveal secrets, or influence world leaders without their knowledge. For intelligence agencies, the concept of mind control seemed like the ultimate weapon. To explore this possibility, the CIA launched MKUltra as a highly secret research program. It was not a single experiment, but rather a collection of more than 150 different projects conducted by scientists, universities, prisons, hospitals, and research centers. Many of these studies were hidden behind legitimate-looking psychological research. Participants often believed they were volunteering for harmless experiments. In reality, some were exposed to powerful drugs or intense psychological stress without fully understanding what was happening. The role of Sidney Gottlieb. One of the central figures behind MKUltra was a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb, who led the program's research division. Gottlieb had worked for the government for years and was known for his intense patriotism. He believed that developing new intelligence techniques could help the United States win the Cold War. Under his direction, MKUltra explored a wide range of methods for influencing human behavior. These included hypnosis, sensory deprivation, electroshock treatments, psychological abuse, and various experimental drugs. Among all the substances tested, one became particularly important: LSD, a powerful hallucinogenic compound that had been discovered only a few years earlier. Scientists believed LSD might temporarily break down a person's sense of identity or perception of reality. If that happened, researchers wondered whether new beliefs or instructions could be implanted in the subject's mind. The CIA became fascinated with the drug and began purchasing large quantities for experimentation. Researchers wanted to learn how LSD affected memory, decision-making, and emotional responses. Drug experiments on unknowing subjects. One of the most controversial aspects of MKUltra was that many people were given LSD without their knowledge. Some were prisoners, mental health patients, or individuals considered socially vulnerable. Others were ordinary civilians who had unknowingly become part of a secret experiment. In some cases, participants believed they were simply taking part in routine medical studies. Researchers did not always inform them that psychoactive drugs were involved. The effects could be extremely unpredictable. LSD can cause vivid hallucinations, emotional instability, and intense fear or confusion. For some people, the experience was euphoric, but for others, it was deeply traumatic. High doses could leave lasting psychological damage. Researchers pushed the limits of the drug's effects, sometimes administering it repeatedly over long periods. In prisons, some volunteers agreed to participate in experiments because they were promised reduced sentences or other incentives. However, the long-term consequences of these studies were rarely considered. Operation Midnight Climax. One of the strangest MKUltra operations was known as Operation Midnight Climax. This project was designed to study how LSD influenced human behavior in real-world situations. To carry out the experiment, the CIA set up safe houses in cities such as San Francisco and New York. Women were hired to pose as sex workers and bring unsuspecting men back to these locations. Once inside, the men were secretly given LSD, sometimes by having the drug slipped into their drinks. Behind one-way mirrors, CIA agents observed the subjects' reactions. They recorded how the men behaved under the influence of the drug while interacting with the women. Agents involved in the project reportedly treated it almost like entertainment, drinking alcohol and watching the experiments unfold. While researchers believed they were gathering valuable behavioral data, the ethics of the operation were deeply questionable. The men being studied rarely knew they were part of an experiment. The mysterious death of Frank Olson. One of the most troubling incidents linked to MKUltra involved Frank Olson, a government scientist who had worked with the CIA. During a meeting with colleagues in 1953, Olson was unknowingly given LSD by Sidney Gottlieb. Soon afterward, he began experiencing severe psychological distress. According to reports, he became paranoid, confused, and emotionally unstable. 9 days after being dosed with the drug, Olson fell from a 13th-floor hotel window in New York City and died. At the time, his death was ruled a suicide. Years later, journalists and investigators began questioning that conclusion. Some believed Olson may have been killed to prevent him from revealing information about MKUltra. When Olson's body was exhumed decades later, forensic analysis suggested he may have suffered a head injury before falling from the window. The case remains controversial, and the full truth about what happened that night is still debated. Experiments in prisons. Prisons were another major testing ground for MKUltra. Inmates were often offered small incentives, such as improved living conditions or reduced sentences, in exchange for participating in studies. One of the prisoners involved in these experiments was James Whitey Bulger, who later became a notorious organized crime figure in Boston. While incarcerated in the 1950s, Bulger volunteered for what he believed was research into schizophrenia. Instead, he was repeatedly given LSD as part of CIA experiments. Bulger later described the experience as psychologically devastating. He said the drug caused hallucinations, anxiety, and a sense of mental chaos. Years later, Bulger claimed the experiments had contributed to his violent behavior after leaving prison. Although it is impossible to prove a direct connection, his story highlights the potential long-term consequences of such experiments. Psychological experiments in hospitals. Some of the most disturbing MKUltra experiments were conducted in psychiatric hospitals. One psychiatrist connected to the program, Dr. Donald Cameron, believed he could treat mental illness by completely breaking down a patient's existing personality and rebuilding it from scratch. His approach involved a process he called depatterning. Patients were subjected to extreme electroshock therapy, heavy drug sedation, and long periods of induced sleep. Some remained in medically induced comas for weeks. During this time, recorded messages were played repeatedly in their rooms, sometimes for up to 20 hours a day. The goal was to erase existing patterns of thought and replace them with new psychological programming. Many patients entered treatment seeking help for relatively manageable mental health issues. Instead, they emerged severely impaired. Some lost basic cognitive abilities, struggled with memory, or became dependent on others for daily care. Families later described these patients as shadows of their former selves. Exposure and destruction of evidence. For many years, MKUltra remained almost completely secret. Even within the government, very few officials knew the full scope of the program. In 1973, however, the CIA's leadership changed. Around this time, Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of most MKUltra records. Boxes of documents were shredded or burned. The decision eliminated much of the evidence about what had happened during the program's 2 decades of activity. Despite this effort, some records survived. In 1975, investigations by the U.S. Congress, particularly the Church Committee, began uncovering details about MKUltra. Testimony from former participants and the remaining documents revealed the shocking scale of the experiments. The public reaction was intense. Americans learned that their own government had secretly experimented on citizens, prisoners, and patients without proper consent. If you found this video shocking, remember that history still holds many secrets waiting to be uncovered. The truth behind programs like MKUltra reminds us how powerful and dangerous hidden experiments can be. If you enjoyed this video and want more fascinating stories like this, like and subscribe to the channel.